Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today all of this Battlefield 2042 hype has got me revisiting one of my favorite Battlefield games, Battlefield 1. This game, by far, is the most sold Battlefield game of all time, which is particularly impressive considering it also had the most hurdles to overcome. Taking this franchise back to a period in which the weapons of war were so old and obscure by today's standards and crafting them into the Battlefield experience was no easy task, and DICE did a phenomenal job of it in my opinion. I loaded up the game yesterday and realized that I really shouldn't have stayed away for as long as I did. The sniping in this game is probably my biggest Battlefield guilty pleasure. Yes, I know, the sweet spot mechanic is a little bit noob friendly, but my god is it satisfying to snipe in this game. Whether it's with the Martini Henry and using the iron sights for quick shots or the Gewehr 98 for long range headshots, there's a huge amount of variety in the sniping world. Plus the sidearms in Battlefield 1 are absolutely brutal, so swapping to 1911 to down foes in close quarters is no big deal. This was the Battlefield game that said, hey, snipers are going to get a massive upgrade this time around, and well, the rest of you are just going to have to deal with it. And it's not to say that the other classes were slouches by any means. I actually think that every class was a lot of fun to play and brought entirely different strengths to the Battlefield, more so than just about any other game. Battlefield 1 was probably the best at class diversification. Each class had ranges of engagement that they really excelled at and specific team roles that they did way better than anyone else could. The Scout class's flare guns were the bread and butter of quick combat intel and locating people hiding in objective areas. Support was the ultimate suppression class, both with its highly effective mid to long range machine guns and mortar system. The Assault dominated close quarters with shotguns, SMGs, and a plethora of explosives, and the Medic handled medium range engagements elegantly with SLRs and of course provided the invaluable revive and health mechanics. But DICE also allowed for a lot of great crossover meta. Not every class had to fit exactly into their designated role and could be easily pushed toward different engagement ranges with the proper setups. Each class also had options to fight vehicles, so you never had to feel 100% helpless against armor. And one of the best aspects of Battlefield 1, and the thing that I think really just resonates with me when I think about this game and go back to playing this game, is that it just knows how to have fun above all else. Sure, Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 had some wacky emergent gameplay that you could do, but Battlefield 1 just made it easy and was like, hey, you want to fight a tank on a horse? Well, go for it. You want to snipe pilots out of planes or hit them with grenades while they fly past? Heck, why not snipe a pilot out of their plane while on horseback? I certainly did that a few times, and it is so satisfying, and it's not that sort of thing that the game really makes you jump through hoops to try and pull off. Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 3 could require considerable setup time or teamwork to do some of the wackier things in the game, but Battlefield 1 really just let anybody get into it. Bailing out of a biplane onto an airship and having firefights on top of the airship in the sky before the entire thing exploded and comes crashing down on people below. The game was just fun, and it didn't take itself too seriously and was loaded to the brim with style. And Battlefield 1, in my opinion, would have been the best candidate for a more live service content and injecting some sort of free-to-play Battle Royale side edition. But sadly, those evolutions to the franchise were reserved for Battlefield 5 and, well, thus crashed and burned with the rest of that game. I specifically remember when Battle Royales were really picking up steam back when like PUBG was the most popular game around, and I thought DICE could easily whip up a 64-player Battle Royale version of Battlefield 1 Sinai Desert with a few modifications, but unfortunately it just was not to be. But I do still think about that's very specifically a Battlefield 1 Battle Royale. I even made several videos at the time detailing how to do it, practically begging DICE to make a quick Battle Royale, even if it was only for a test environment. I mean, Battlefield 1 sold twice as well as the next most popular Battlefield game, which was Battlefield 3, and that would have made it ripe for live service options and free-to-play offshoots. The opportunities missed here were actually massive. But then again, DICE has always been one of the slower studios when it comes to recognizing game trends and adapting to them quickly. Hopefully that won't be to their detriment, and that 2042 will be a well-designed, more future-proof game that can maybe adapt to the evolving gaming scene as needed. But in the gaming space, even games like COD seem to be 2 to 3 years ahead of Battlefield when it comes to just integrating new trends. Sure, Battlefield dominates on the tech level and integrating new graphics features and engine features much better, but in terms of integrating trends and upgrading UI and live service content and limited time events and all that kind of stuff, COD has always been miles ahead of Battlefield. And despite Battlefield 1 being the most popular selling Battlefield game of all time, it did suffer more player retention issues when compared to, say, Battlefield 4, which held much bigger player counts for longer periods of time. This was in part due to the fact that Battlefield 4 had a lot more custom server and community building options early on, which Battlefield 1 just didn't get until much later, and even then were extremely limited in their scope. So while the standard game modes for Battlefield 1 were a lot of fun, once you cycled through them, the variety felt like a lot less, and thus the longevity of the game suffered. Another thing that affected Battlefield 1's player retention is that, well, it also completely reinvented the way that weapon balance and weapon handling worked, which threw off a lot of the legacy players. When you come into the game from, say, Battlefield 4 and love so much of the gunplay with how the previous game worked, and then jump into a new game with tons of random bullet deviation and different ways to balance things, well, it was off-putting to say the least. It also didn't help that the game launched with weapon mechanics that were considerably worse than they eventually became after a lot of balance works. So I think it lost a lot of players early on who potentially didn't come back to try out the new mechanics or give the game enough time to learn the ideas behind the balance concepts. The weapon balance concepts of Battlefield 1 were actually pretty interesting, but it was a steeper learning curve and also just not very intuitive when it came to understanding the deeper meta. It required much more stat diving to understand the interesting potentials of a gun and then adapting your playstyle around those stats. Again, something that the average player wouldn't do, and frankly isn't a great approach to teaching a player base about your deeper weapon mechanics. It does make me wonder if Battlefield 2042 will integrate weapon stat data into the UI this time around. It's been something that I've wanted in the franchise forever, like an advanced tab that lets you see all the damage mechanics of a weapon so that you can better understand the inner workings without having to exit out of the game and read a stats website or watch a deep dive YouTube video about a gun. It should be set up in a way so that the average player can learn a lot more about the game from within the game rather than having to rely on outside sources. Now, another thing that's fun about jumping back into Battlefield 1 after all this time is, well, one, hitting it with some new upgraded hardware. If you were lucky enough to get a 30 series NVIDIA GPU, well, it can absolutely chew up this game, easily getting over 140 FPS, with most of the graphics settings left at medium to high range, finding a good balance in there. It is interesting, though, because so many new titles have DLSS enabled, and from what I've read and from what I hear, well, integrating DLSS features to older games isn't necessarily the hardest thing in the world, and it's something that I think, maybe DICE could spend a little time, quickly update Battlefield 1 with the DLSS patch, and give everybody who hasn't played the game in a while, or people who are still playing it, a reason to load it up and see just how much better their FPS could be. Because Battlefield 5, I think, had sort of an early version of DLSS integrated to try and help out its FPS overall, but Battlefield 1 really could help from a DLSS upgrade. It would be awesome to see people with mid-tier systems load up Battlefield 1 and get insane frame rates. And again, from somebody with no graphical programming background, I think it's something that DICE could probably get a rudimentary version of working within, I don't know, a week or something like that. It seems to be relatively easy for a lot of developers to integrate DLSS functionality. Anyway, I absolutely love jumping back into Battlefield 1. It reminds me of all the things I loved about the game. A few of the things that I still don't like about the game, sure, airburst mortar and extremely powerful vehicles at times. But beyond that, I really don't think Battlefield 1 is one of those games that I remember incorrectly. Sometimes you build up extremely fond memories of a game and you get back into it and you're like, oh boy, this didn't age well, or all my memories were sort of like ignoring the fact of all the annoying aspects of the game, but Battlefield 1 is just fun. It's really great getting back into it. All the fun stuff is easy to do, easy to get back into, doesn't require teaming up with some sort of advanced squad to have a great time. It's just a good, solid game, and is probably going to be one of my all-time favorite Battlefield games. Let me know in the comments if you're still playing Battlefield 1, where it stands on your favorite Battlefield games list. What was your favorite thing about the game? And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.